Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining. Thank you for joining in such large numbers. Thank you to coming for our joint International Solar Alliance and Global Solar Council session on scaling solar skills. We are a workforce, a global workforce on 7 million, and so we really need to be doing the workforce planning for the global energy transition, the workforce planning for the global solar and battery storage industry. My name is Sonia Dunlop. I'm the CEO of the Global Solar Council. We are the worldwide solar PV and battery storage industry association, representing the private sector in every market around the world, every part of the value chain, manufacturing and project development, and every market segment, from off-grid solar to rooftop solar, residential and commercial, utility scale solar, all over the world. I'm delighted to say that as the Global Solar Council, we have launched a new initiative, the Global Solar Training Standard, to create a global training standard at global level for workers in utility scale solar, to make sure they are safe, to make sure they are properly trained, and to make sure we have the skilled workforce we need in order to get to our goal of 8 terawatts. 8 terawatts of total installed capacity of PV by 2030 and 1.5 terawatts of total installed capacity of battery storage. So I'm delighted to be joined by a fantastic panel today of representatives from governments, from industry associations, and from institutions from all over the world to discuss what it is we need to do in order to build up the skilled workforce for the global energy transition. But first I want to present a few slides about the Global Solar Training Standard, which we hope will be highly complementary to the International Solar Alliance's Star C network of training centers. And we're going to hear a bit more about the new ones in Papua New Guinea and the activities in Senegal around the world. So a few words, and sorry to the panel, you'll have to just look right behind you as much as you can. So as I said, my name's Sonia Dunlop, the CEO of the Global Solar Council, and this initiative is in partnership with the Global Wind Organization, which is actually a global wind industry training specialist, technical and health and training scheme, which is expanding to solar PV, expanding to other renewables, and using the expertise it has built and the scheme that has built in wind to create a similar scheme, to replicate this for solar PV. So if we go to the next slide, hold on one moment. Can we go to the next slide? We are also broadcasting this around the world. I'm going to give a quick overview of the Global Solar Training Standard, and then we'll go to our panel discussion. So what do we need in terms of the solar workforce to get to the tripling of renewables? That is the question that we need to answer. So first of all, a few words about the Global Solar Council. We are a truly global industry association representing national associations from 97% of the world's solar PV market, and companies from every part of the value chain and every part of the world. We have members from APAC region, from the Middle East, from Africa, Europe, North America, and Latin America. And this just gives you an idea of some of the national industry associations and some of the companies that are involved in the Global Solar Council. As I said, every market segment, from off-grid solar at the very smallest scale, all the way to the biggest utility parks of 8 gigawatts in the plains of China and India. And you can see we really do have both national and regional associations and some global associations for off-grid solar or for academic institutions from all over the world. So why is skills and training a priority for us as the Global Solar Council? It is because we understand that we already employ at least 7 million people around the world, and possibly even more, and that we therefore have a responsibility to make sure that they are fully trained, fully looked after, and that we have enough people around the world. And we really need to be thinking about how we're going to meet the ever-growing levels of deployment around the world. So we know that we are getting close to installing 1 terawatt of solar around the world. Half in China, half in the rest of the world, roughly. And we need to make sure we have the people in order to deliver that as we grow and grow. We need to make sure that people are kept safe, that they are given the adequate health and safety training in order to build a utility-scale solar farm. And we'll talk about potentially extending this to rooftop as well. And of course, we need to ensure a just transition. We need to make sure that local electricians, local roofers, local construction companies can upskill and become a solar PV rooftop installer, or can upskill and get involved in utility scale, as well as, of course, building on all the white-collar jobs that we offer as well. So what does the workforce look like today? Of course, a huge number of jobs are concentrated in terms of deployment, of course, in China, but we also have large numbers of jobs in India, in the United States, in Brazil, in Germany, Japan, Poland, Vietnam, Italy, Australia, and so on. And the top 10 countries actually make up 86% of the global workforce, with the International Renewable Energy Agency estimating back in 2023, so this is slightly out of date, that amounts to 7.1 million jobs. And we really need to scale all of this workforce in order to get to the global tripling of renewables target and to get to the Global Solar Council's new mission of 300 million solar homes around the world by the end of the decade. And we need people in work in finance, in planning, in sales, in procurement, in grid connection, in construction and installation, in operations and maintenance, in decommissioning, which is currently small but growing, and in policy work. So we, together with our partner GWO, have done an estimate in terms of what are the numbers of people that we're going to have to train using the Global Solar Training Standard. And we estimate that this will be about 500,000 people by 2025 out of the 730,000 people needed by 2030. And we are targeting to train 50,000 people under this scheme by the end of the decade. 1 gigawatt of deployment in your country roughly generates about 1,500 jobs. Why do we need a global training standard? Well, first of all, there is increasing anecdotal evidence of incidents, accidents in utility scale construction and operation. And in other energy sectors, such as wind and oil and gas, they put in place a scheme in order to ensure that operators are properly trained, but we don't currently have that in solar. We also know that engineering, procurement, and construction companies, the companies that actually build the solar farms, are duplicating each other by each having to create the training internally, in-house, each independently, rather than being able to draw on a central repository of training at global level. We know that some assets, not all, but some solar farms are experiencing issues in terms of performance that can sometimes be traced back to errors that were made in construction. And of course, we know that new solar markets are popping up all the time all over the world, opening up new opportunities for utility scale, and that means that we need to train local people wherever possible, local construction workers, local agricultural workers, in order to meet that demand. So we've partnered with the with the GWO, which is expanding to include all renewables, to create the Global Solar Training Standard. And we have 2 training standards already published on our website: the Solar Safety Training and the Solar Technical Training, both intended for utility scale, both a first draft of the basic training standard that will then be adapted by national training centers all over the world, private sector organizations, for the national requirements in each country. But the basic training, the basic building blocks of each training will be the same anywhere in the world. And this is using the methodology, the system that's already established in wind. So really learning from our colleagues in wind that we have on the panel today, and adapting this for the purposes of solar. And it will be also soon possible to also adapt this in the future for battery storage, for utility scale battery storage. We are asking companies all over the world involved in utility scale solar to sign a charter of support of the Global Solar Training Standards, to say that you are interested in being part of developing this standard and that you are willing to look at how to implement it in your operations, in your processes, and eventually, for asset owners, in your contracts with your subcontractors. And we already have 2 or 3 major asset owners who have said that they will implement this in the contracts with their subcontractors. And you can see we're already garnering major support across industry associations and companies for this training standard for utility scale solar. So now I want to turn to our panel discussion and have a bit of a discussion on how do we implement this with asset owners, with investors, with insurers. What does this mean in different countries around the world? And what is the landscape in terms of the training and skills development situation in different parts of the world? So I'm delighted to have with us Mr. Kader Diop from the Ministry of Energy from Senegal. Thank you so much for joining. Dr. Piyush Verma, the Senior Fellow of ORF America. Thank you so much for being with us. Ransi Panda from the National Energy Administration of Papua New Guinea, who has just received the new Star C Center. Thank you so much. Dr. Rodrigo Sawaya, the CEO of AB Solar Brazil and Chairman of the Global Solar Council. Thank you for coming to give your perspective. And Janice Chung, the Deputy Director for Advocacy across Asia at the Global Wind Energy Council, because in many ways we are taking the experience of the wind industry and adapting it for solar. And finally, Robert Marinkovic from the International Organization of Employers. You're an advisor on climate change and green economy there, and we'll be really keen to get your perspective as well. So, Kader Diop, if I can come to you first and ask you to give a bit of a perspective from Senegal. How do you see the situation in terms of the skills and workforce in Senegal to install both rooftop solar and utility scale solar? And what do you think about how can we find training centers in Senegal to credit themselves to the Global Solar Training Standards and to become and to adapt it for the local needs in Senegal, for the local environment, the local topography as well? And make sure that we have the skilled people in Senegal, so that when someone wants to come and build a solar farm in Senegal, you have local people ready to upskill and deliver the necessary work. And I will give you a microphone from here. Mr. Diop, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Sonia. I'm sorry for the people, but I'm talking in French. I think so that we have good translation. There. Merci encore. Je pense qu'au niveau du Sénégal, la formation en solaire est très développée. Effectivement, on l'a sur plusieurs niveaux, autant au niveau universitaire qu'au niveau formation technique et professionnelle. Et quand nous, on parle de la formation technique et professionnelle au Sénégal, on parle autant du niveau universitaire que du niveau, effectivement, technicien pur et dur. Et l'usage en tant que tel du solaire est extrêmement répandu. Aujourd'hui, c'est l'une des énergies renouvelables les plus répandues au niveau du Sénégal. Et on l'a sur plusieurs secteurs d'activité. D'abord, parce que c'est ce qu'on connaît la plupart du temps, au niveau du réseau interconnecté, parce qu'on a plusieurs centrales actuellement qui sont développées, mises en service et très opérationnelles actuellement. On a également je pense qu'ils ont une capacité totale installée de pratiquement 250 MW. On a également une centrale éolienne fonctionnelle, la centrale de Taïbanyaï, qui est à une puissance là aussi de pratiquement 158 MW. Et aujourd'hui, vous vous rendez compte qu'au-delà maintenant de ce qui est installé dans le réseau interconnecté de Sénélec, il y a plusieurs autres acteurs, que ce soit l'industrie, que ce soit le commerce, que ce soit l'agriculture, que ce soit effectivement les ménages à travers les Solar Home Systems, qui ont effectivement beaucoup développé ces installations solaires, effectivement pour pouvoir leur permettre de pouvoir non seulement avoir une activité économique, mais se rendre encore beaucoup plus compétitif que ce qu'il en était, parce qu'aujourd'hui encore, le coût de l'électricité au niveau du Sénégal est encore un coût qui est assez cher. Alors, pour vous dire qu'on a également un potentiel extrêmement fort au niveau du Sénégal, surtout au niveau en termes de solaire. Le potentiel, il est énorme, il est pratiquement quasiment uniforme au niveau sur toute l'étendue du territoire. Ça veut dire que n'importe quel acteur aujourd'hui a la capacité de pouvoir développer son installation solaire pour pouvoir procéder à son activité. Le gouvernement en tant que tel s'est engagé pour faciliter l'accès universel à l'énergie. Avant 2030, pratiquement, on se fixe l'objectif d'être à l'accès universel à l'horizon 2029, mais surtout de mettre au cœur de notre stratégie ce qu'on appelle l'usage productif de l'énergie. Parce que tout simplement, on a beau justement avoir l'énergie, mais si on n'a pas les moyens, les ressources nécessaires pour pouvoir produire justement de la valeur ajoutée sur toute la chaîne de valeur et pouvoir payer autant ces investissements que l'investissement, que effectivement assurer sa rentabilité économique, là, ça ne servirait pas à grand chose.
Est-ce que vous, dans la valeur ajoutée, vous voyez aussi des emplois locaux comme une partie de la valeur ajoutée?
Bien entendu, parce qu'aujourd'hui, je pense que la plupart actuellement des jeunes qui sortent justement des formations académiques escomptent aller effectivement vers ces formations d'énergie renouvelable. Au début, c'était très peu, mais aujourd'hui, vous voyez, pratiquement toutes les universités du Sénégal ont développé justement des formations universitaires. On a des masters interuniversitaires d'ailleurs en énergie renouvelable. On a récemment développé d'ailleurs l'Agence nationale pour les énergies renouvelables avec l'Alliance solaire internationale, ce qu'on appelle dans le cadre du projet StarC, avec l'école polytechnique de Thiès. On a développé là aussi d'autres modules de formation. Mais ce qui est encore plus important à dire, au lieu de les citer comme ça, c'est que dans ces formations universitaires, de plus en plus, et techniques d'ailleurs, formation professionnelle et technique, de plus en plus on inclut deux volets extrêmement importants. C'est le volet de l'IT, donc les technologies de l'information et de la communication, et effectivement les technologies des télécoms. Parce que de plus en plus, ces systèmes, que ce soit solaire ou autre chose, sont appelés à communiquer autant en réseau isolé, autant également en réseau interconnecté. Voilà en tout cas de manière globale ce qu'on peut dire. Il y a plein de choses à dire à ce niveau-là. Et on peut dire qu'effectivement, pour le moment, les jeunes escomptent en tout cas développer, au-delà d'avoir en tout cas des jobs, mais ils veulent plutôt aller vers l'esprit d'entrepreneuriat. Et c'est pourquoi dans les formations universitaires et les formations techniques et professionnelles, on inclut également des centres d'incubation pour pouvoir les appuyer à être de véritables entrepreneurs futurs.
Et je peux vous dire d'ailleurs que nous, on est en train de travailler avec l'association nationale au Sénégal. Mais ça serait bien aussi, après, quand on revient vers vous, de aussi parler un peu sur le Just Energy Transition Partnership que vous avez en Sénégal. Et comme vous voyez le niveau des emplois et de la formation dans le Just Transition, dans la partie Just Transition de ça. Mais merci beaucoup, Monsieur Diop, pour votre participation. So he was telling us a bit about the Senegalese national energy strategy. And the perspective from Senegal in terms of getting value added out of solar, wind and other renewables. Dr. Piyush Verma, I'd like to come to you next. You're a senior fellow at ORF America, and you've been involved in the Indonesian efforts in Indonesia, I believe, on the IBSA and the Indonesian Energy Transition Project. Can you tell us a bit more about what the skills and training and workforce planning situation is in Indonesia? A country of what, 250 million people? I can't remember the latest numbers. But really, with a 100 gigawatt solar target, they have a huge amount of ambition. But how they're actually going to deliver that in terms of policy, but how they're going to deliver that in terms of skills is absolutely critical. So Dr. Piyush, please give us your perspective on Indonesia.
Thank you, Sonia, and pleasure to be here. I think very important question. But also looking at the SITS kind of the background that you have, I think I'm thinking of sharing an example from my personal life experience coming from a SITS country, and I think it is very important to talk about to set that kind of context, the importance of this topic that we are discussing. 6 months ago, so this organization, ORF America, I joined in July, but before that I was working for the UN Development Program. And I was in one of the country as a chief technical advisor, country Niue. And Niue is a very small island country. It's a 1700 population, 60-kilometer radius. I was in that country looking at how to advise the government on the energy policy, and including this solar energy policy. One of the experience that I got from that small island country was when I went into that whole island. I saw there were 12 solar micro farms from 20 kilowatt up to 600 kilowatt. Okay, so there was donor money. Somebody invested, and that solar panels were all installed within last 3 to 4 years, 5 years. Okay, so 12 solar micro farms. When I went on the island, not the single solar farm was working, not the single. Okay, all like a stranded asset. And when I dig deeper, when I talked to the government, when I got to the local, the technician or the local electricity department, then I found that when there was installation, it's an island country near New Zealand. Okay, so then there were technicians came from New Zealand, and they came and they installed the solar panel, and they went away, right? And when they went away, then maybe one inverter failed, maybe one solar panel, failed, because all this in series and parallel and all those connections, right? So one panel failed. Maybe some electricity wire kind of got disconnected by somehow, maybe some storm or something. So there were these little kind of, smaller kind of challenges. And because of that, not a single solar farm was in operation when I was 6 months ago. So think about, there is no technician, there is no skill on the island, right? So I think that's the kind of challenge we are talking about here. It's not just about, putting the solar panel, but how you are going to how you're going to ensure that this sustainable energy is going to, help your home, help your businesses, help your island, help your country, right? So this is the challenge, okay? Now, coming back to your question, I think this, we are running a project called IPSA, India, Brazil, South Africa, and Indonesia project. And we are specifically looking for, because of these 4 countries, because these are the big global South countries, collectively these countries bring 2.5 billion population. So almost 25% of the population coming from these countries. These countries are already leading the solar energy revolution. There are a lot of things going on in terms of, building the skill set. How these countries can come together collectively to help other global South countries, right? How these countries can also collaborate between these 4 countries to bring the complementary strengths, not just in terms of the technology, but I think, Sonia, you showed, right? We need different kind of skill set. Finance, policy, operation and maintenance, right? I was just talking about that, right? There are a lot of land issues are also coming, right? It's also becoming a human right issue when you are talking about big solar farms, right? Who is going to give the land? How that land is going to be utilized? So we need like really multidisciplinary approach when we are talking about this solar energy system. So how you are going to do that? So in terms of the first and foremost, the recommendation is like the role of the Ministry of Education is to integrate this solar and green skills into every discipline, every education department, every education, the degrees that we have, right? Whether you do economics, whether you do finance, whether you do engineering, right? How you can bring this solar skill set into those areas so that we can take that multidisciplinary approach. That is very, very important. The second aspect that I wanted to highlight is very critical is the people who are transitioning from coal sector or fossil fuel sector, right? Coal, oil and gas. Now they're kind of, the jobs they are losing, and, they need to move into, maybe building new different skill set for the solar energy sector. There are still, they don't know how to move on, how to get the new skills. So, for example, there are standards, there are skill set, but they need some kind of counseling, they need some kind of support to understand the pathways. So I think that's a big gap, that we are not talking about it.
And I think that's a big part of Just Transition. I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave it there.
So that's the second aspect. And the third aspect, I think there is a very big role of the labor unions.
Labor unions, yeah.
The labor unions, we are not talking about it. Labor unions talk about the human right issues, talk about the labor right issues, all those aspects. But how labor union can collaborate more actively in building skills, for the future, working with the government, working with the private sector.
Yeah.
So labor union has to come more strongly on that.
Yeah,
So I
and
think
really
these
the
are the
construction and agricultural labor unions are the ones that are most relevant. Thank you so much, Dr. Verma. Thank you so much. Next, I want to move to Papua New Guinea. Renzi Panda from the National Energy Administration of Papua New Guinea. Be really interesting to hear how you think you in PNG can develop the skills needed in order to deliver the small-scale solar, the rooftop solar, and the ground-mounted solar in your country, and also about your new Star C Center with the International Solar Alliance. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Um, it's very interesting because the National Energy Authority, which I work for, currently issues electrical licenses for electricians and contractors. We have a specific solar energy renewable policy. We also have standards, technical guideline for solar PV and battery energy storages. These are for the rooftop and off-grid as well. We also have regulations and guidance in place, but currently all our installations are being done by electricians that are certified by the National Energy Authority. The Stasi Center was launched last month, and not last month, in September, alongside ISA and one of the academic institutions in PNG. So in terms of the integration of labor transition with upskilling, especially looking at the certification of solar and solar standards, we have successfully managed to rein in the role of the education sector, because the Solar Stasi Center now is being launched and implemented by the Technical Institute that graduates almost 90% of our electricians, the ones with diploma. Now, with the establishment of the Solar Stasi Center, we have a memorandum of understanding between ISA and the educational institution to actually upgrade the qualification from a mere diploma to a degree. And also we're looking at different levels of certification that also applies to the different standards, and also specifically looking at, for example, the battery energy storage system on its own, rooftop solar on its own, off-grid solar on its own. So those are the examples. The opportunity for the Pacific region is there. The institution, the educational institution itself also takes in Pacific Island students for other courses. So they also foresee an opportunity to certify solar certificate holders from the region, and not only restricted to PNG, because all the Pacific Island countries, we use the Australia and New Zealand standards, and I would agree with the examples with the shortages of manpower that our colleague was talking about. So opportunity for expansion is there. Now our biggest challenge is how do we integrate the role of that educational institution with all the other partners that we flag them on the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so interesting, your example of taking the national electrician training standard as the foundation and then building on that to create a solar specific training. And yes, to your point about the issue of small island countries where a solar is installed, but then there are no maintenance skills in this island. We are hoping that within the global solar training standards there will be an online remote course that can also be taken for very remote locations, maintaining off-grid systems, small mini grids and so on, in order to make sure that we have that easy maintenance capacity to train people there. Thank you. If you don't mind passing the microphone on, I would like to move from PNG to Brazil. So Dr. Rodrigo Sawaya is the chairman of the Global Solar Council and also the CEO of AB Solar Brazil, the national Brazilian solar storage and increasingly green hydrogen organization here in Brazil. Be really interesting to hear, how many solar jobs you have in Brazil, how you see the prospects for skilling up and planning for the workforce that you'll need for the future, and what the sort of solar training ecosystem looks like in this country.
Well, thank you, Sonia, and I would like to start by thanking the International Solar Alliance for the invitation and also the Global Solar Council for co-organizing this event. I also want to congratulate the Global Solar Council on the important work that is being done in this area of training and standards. And I want to give the example of Brazil. Last year, Brazil added almost 19 gigawatts of solar to the electricity grid in a single year. So this means that we created 450,000 jobs. And the big majority of these jobs are jobs related to the design of the systems and the installation of the systems, as well as selling the systems. So we need knowledge and experience and standardization in the quality of the service that is provided in all of these areas. So when we look into the technical part, and specifically installing systems, in Brazil about 2/3 of these new power plants, they came from rooftop systems, and 1/3 from large-scale power plants. In a large-scale power plant, we are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of investments. So you cannot get it wrong with your installation. This is key, it is crucial for these projects to generate enough revenue to pay back the financiers, the banks, where you got the money to put the projects in the first hand. So having a standardization process is very important for the performance of the system. On the other hand, we are dealing with a lot of people and with people's lives, and electricity is a life hazard. So they need to be trained also considering safety, because safety is key to guarantee that these professionals will be working system after system, day after day during the installation processes without any hazard to their health. And when we talk, Sonia, about ground-mounted systems, we have a set of skills, and this is very interesting, that in the solar sector, once a professional finishes the installation of that system, he is not out of job. He can transfer many of this knowledge into small-scale systems on the rooftops of his community. So he can learn through the help of large-scale projects how to install systems, and then after this project is done, he can start his own company or work for a company in distributed generation, another market segment, to keep the job moving forward.
So you see transfer from utility scale solar that can then transfer to local rooftop solar, SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises in that community. That's a really good idea, actually.
Yes, and in this case, the job is not lost, so to speak, after the end of the installation. So we keep giving people more opportunities to create revenue and to improve their quality of lives.
Because there are very few jobs in the operations and maintenance of utility scale solar, right? So it's a scheme for maintaining local employment. Yeah.
Exactly. And for small scale systems, you need not only installation of the rooftop that need hands, as you also usually say, you need a pair of hands, you need people to do this installation. They won't be robots, they will be people. But you also need to train them to work on rooftops, and working on heights require a special set of skills and training also to avoid hazards. If someone fell from a roof, that could be a life hazard as well. So you need to adapt this training from the ground-mounted systems to working on rooftop systems. But these professionals will be able also to have a long-term job opportunity in the solar sector. And it's not only installing, because on the small rooftop systems, you have more operation and maintenance and cleaning jobs as well. So they will need more cleaning that will be done by people rather than robots. And this can also bring more opportunities of revenue to small and medium companies.
That's such a good idea that I've gone to write it down in the back of my notebook as a thing that we need to be pushing. I really like it. And also there is potential for the Global Solar Training Standards initiative, which is currently only utility scale but could be expanded to rooftop in the future. Janice, I want to come to you next. Janice Chong, you're the Deputy Director for Advocacy in GWEC Asia. GWEC is the Global Wind Energy Council, the industry association that represents the wind industry at global level. Different to GWO, which is the Training Standards Organization, correct? Please do teach us about what you've achieved in the wind industry and what your recommendations are for solar, which is essentially the process of adapting and copying the scheme that you have developed in wind, and any other lessons learned that you want to share with us. Janice, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sonia. I think some really good points have been said, and I think very transferable as well. One thing that I like to highlight is that I'm very, very happy to see local country representatives talk about their experience. I think one of the key lessons that we've learned through working with the wind training programs and standards is that you really need to adapt it to the local context. What we do and what the Global Wind Organization also does is work together with local associations. For example, in Japan, together with the Japanese Wind Power Association, in America, the American Clean Power, to develop standards that are local specific to local context, so that they can address local needs and understand the current trends for workforce as well. That said, there is still a lot to do in wind. We have standards and we have had it for 3 or 4 years now, but there is still a wind skills gap. And I want to address it here before I talk about some of the other lessons learned. The wind skills gap really highlights that we need, similar to solar, 532,000 new wind technicians by 2028.
So if you're looking for a job, try wind or solar.
Exactly. That's through construction, installations, but also operations and maintenance. And this is to meet the demand of offshore as well as onshore wind. And in offshore, there's both fixed bottom as well as floating. We did a report with the Global Wind Organization, and we found that 40% of these roles will need to be filled by new entrants, that's young people like you guys, from 2024, which was last year, to 2027. We do still have workforce challenges, and we're working with churn in our industry as well. That's 6% across wind. And despite this, we have learned a lot of key lessons. So the first one is tailoring it to local strategies. Second one is what you mentioned as well, Rodrigo, is safety. We're really talking about human capital, and that's a key part of the supply chain, whether wind or solar or any other renewable technology. In the wind industry, we really advocate for a safety-first culture. And the GWO's success really comes from embedding safety at the heart of training, ensuring workers are equipped for high-risk environments. And very similar to, rooftop solar, wind works at great heights, for example. Solar can also adopt this, proactively as you develop your own training standards. The second one is the standardization that we worked with GWO really allows for this mobility, and that's mobility across different countries, and also in the future, perhaps the mobility across different technologies.
Yeah, but
And
of course,
third-
emphasizing that many countries will want to develop their own local workforces as well, right? So there's a balance between mobility and developing a local workforce, and this allows you to do both.
Yeah. And thirdly, offshore wind, the attributes and the workforce that's required is very similar to traditional, conventional energy sources like oil and gas. We've got really good examples from, for example, Scotland, that have successfully been able to transition workers in oil and gas into offshore wind. And in Singapore, where I'm based right now, we're looking to do the same for marine and offshore industries, and seeing how that can be serving the offshore wind industry.
Fantastic, Janice. That's so useful and really, really interesting. And I really, when we need to make this transition at speed and at scale. And that involves learning from our partners, learning from other technologies, learning how to do things right, what works, what doesn't work, and therefore accelerating implementation of these kind of schemes in that way. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, and really interesting to hear see the depth of the analysis that you have in terms of your industry. Robert Marinkovic, you're from the International Organization of Employers, the global federation of employers organizations, business organizations. Really keen, you're thinking about the skills challenge from a totally global, pan-economy level. Obviously, I know you work on climate change and renewables within the IOE. How do you see it from your very big picture level, and how do you see that just transition as well? From traditional energy to new energy, can that really happen realistically, and what do we need to do to make it happen? Robert, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Sonia. Thank you for having me here and for the opportunity. Unfortunately, I have to leave straight after this for another panel at 5 p.m., but I'll keep it short and sweet. IOE works across the world. We have members in more than 145 countries, covering all sectors of the economy, like you said. We're the official representatives of employers to the ILO, the International Labor Organization. And I mean, for us in this context, talking about just transition, talking about skilling, I think, we see it as an opportunity, basically. We see it as an opportunity for things like, for example, dealing with the informal sector and people working in the informal economy. If we can reach people in emerging and developing economies and provide them with skills for the renewable energy sector, we can provide them with better livelihoods, and we can provide them with better sources of income. And then also, I think some of the very important points that were mentioned around occupational safety and health, social protection, those types of things. And for me, I would also like to echo what was said about labor unions. I think there is an element of trust working with governments, employers, and trade unions to make this happen. I think we all need to work together in order to scale it up further. We need to engage local actors also. That's very important. Going back to the example from Senegal, our member in Senegal is the Conseil National du Patronat. So even though our members don't specifically focus on the renewable energy sector, I think it's important to keep them involved as well, because often they're the ones who at the national level sit on things like solar councils, skills councils, and they're the ones who engage the government in negotiations. And that brings me perhaps to my last point, is the importance of an enabling environment, the importance of policies that can push us to the higher scale and to continue this progress. And we already have, I think, a lot of the solutions out there, right? Things like, feed-in tariffs that were used, renewable energy standards. Recently, I heard an example of Korea mandating that all parking lots in the country have to have solar panels.
Or sometimes all new buildings have to be built with solar panels, yeah?
Exactly. So I think, there are some of these levers and mechanisms to stimulate the demand. And then once, what was said at the other panel we were at together is, once you stimulate the demand, once you have a project pipeline, once you start, creating this push to implement, people will jump on it, and you need to trust the private sector to then implement and make sure that the people are trained. And then, very, very much important, train the local workforce and make sure that there is the long-term vision as well, instead of installing and leaving. So we're very happy to support and work further on this. And I think having a global standard on solar is an amazing work. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and I know you need to leave, so thank you very much indeed. And just to add your point to the point about the informal workforce, if you look at a country like Pakistan that installed 17 gigawatts in 1 year after previously being almost nothing, they were teaching themselves how to install solar on TikTok, with TikTok videos, totally informally, wiring up these systems, and I'm sure as safely as possible, and just goes to show how this can be incredibly informal, right? And that is something that we really have to bear in mind. Monsieur Diop, I'm going to switch to French now, so if you want to put your thing in. Monsieur Diop, je veux me retourner chez vous parce que je suis intéressée un peu de parler sur le Just Energy Transition Partnership, le JETP, parce qu'on est aussi en train de parler sur la Just Transition ici, et comment est-ce qu'on peut vraiment faire que les emplois dans le solaire font partie de ce JETP. Donc une question pour vous sur cela. Has everyone got their thing in? Yeah? Just Transition.
Merci encore Sonia pour cette relance. Je pense qu'effectivement, le Sénégal, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, a eu à montrer dans sa première phase de mise en œuvre de sa CDN qu'effectivement, on était allé au-delà même d'ailleurs de nos performances. Parce qu'il faut le rappeler, on s'était fixé comme objectif d'avoir que 18% d'énergie renouvelable dans la puissance installée, dans le réseau interconnecté de Sénégal, à l'horizon 2022. Et il s'est avéré que en 2022, on avait largement dépassé déjà ces taux de 18%. On était déjà à 23, voire 25%. Ce qui a justifié derrière qu'effectivement, on nous ait proposé de pouvoir relever encore une fois de plus l'ambition d'aller vers justement, en tout cas, un taux de pénétration beaucoup plus important. Dans le design du JETP, après l'avoir signé, effectivement, on a pratiquement finalisé d'ailleurs le plan d'investissement, mais on a voulu que ce soit véritablement un accord équitable qui intègre pratiquement tous les acteurs, qui intègre également tout ce qui est justice sociale. Et donc, dans la formulation même d'ailleurs de ce JETP, en termes de mise en œuvre, tous les acteurs ont été impliqués, que ce soit la société civile, que ce soit les acteurs, les professionnels, le patronat, que ce soit les universitaires, que ce soit également les institutionnels, tous les acteurs ont été impliqués effectivement dans la réflexion, dans la formulation et surtout dans la mise en œuvre. Et d'ailleurs, dans l'identification des projets, des programmes. Il me plaît également dans ce sens-là d'indiquer peut-être certains points qui nous semblent extrêmement importants. Parce que dans le GETP, l'objectif est plutôt d'aller vers, comme les autres pays l'ont fait, ce qui est dans le réseau interconnecté. Mais nous, dans la réflexion et dans la mise en œuvre, on ne se limite pas uniquement à la puissance installée dans le réseau interconnecté. On va également adresser la question sous l'angle des autres usages, qui ne sont pas forcément dans le réseau, des autres usages. Isolated grid system. Que ce soit pratiquement des acteurs qui ont qui sont déjà interconnectés dans le réseau, mais qui ont leur propre système, que ce soit également des acteurs qui sont vraiment dans les villages reculés, où il n'y a pas accès à l'électricité, il n'y a pas de réseau en tant que tel. Donc tous ces gens-là sont également impliqués dans la formulation et la mise en œuvre du GEP.
And maybe can I stop there and give the microphone to Renzi and say, have you also had to come up with different skill strategies for off-grid and on-grid? Do you think there's a difference in terms of the skills needed, and have you reflected that in the program in your ministry?
Yes, we have, and they're captured in our 9 technical regulations that just got approved by Cabinet last week.
Maybe we can go to Dr. Verma just for any additional thoughts you have in terms of, so you said you were working on this initiative in terms of, you said it was India, Brazil, South Africa and Indonesia, is that right? Yeah. So is that skills across everything, or is it across the whole of this? Is it about deployment more widely and then looking at skills within that?
I think when we are talking about the global energy transition, and especially the global South energy transition, these are the countries at the forefront, right? India, Brazil, South Africa, and Indonesia. Especially in terms of when you are talking about green skills that we need to build, right? It's not every country has the demography to leverage those skill set, right? Where is the young population who will be trained in the coming time, right? In the coming years? It's India. Right, it's country like Nigeria, right? Those are the young population countries. So I think we need to ensure what kind of countries, which countries need to be prioritized to leverage the demography in building the skill set that can serve it for the global energy transition.
So you're saying different skill strategies for countries that have large percentage of youth in the population,
exactly.
and then. So, say Korea would have a different strategy again.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you think countries like Korea that have an aging population would need to look at importing the skills?
Importing those skill set, right? So countries like, for example, I'll give you a very brief example. India is known for global tech talent, right? India is providing like engineers and technologies all over the world, right? But that happened as a result of a strong policy push in early 1990s. India created a national IT act, that where there was a dedicated focus on building a skill set on technology. There were a number of institutions came at the national level, and that computer scientists, information technologists, now they are serving all over the world, right? So that was an intention program, and that same approach we need to think now, right? And especially in those countries where the demography is, what kind of institution we need to create to build solar and broader green skill set, what kind of policies we need to build, and then how do you ensure the implementation of those skill set, not just their own countries, but how do you export the talent, right? Talent, those green skills to other countries, where there is aging population, right? So I think that is very important aspect that we need to think about, leveraging the demographic kind of advantage. The second aspect I would also highlight, it's like how do you leverage the artificial intelligence? We are living in the AI era, right? In the digital era. How those training programs can be provided maybe in very remote island countries, can it be like virtual labs, right? Online training programs, right? Maybe operation and maintenance. Now you don't need to go every time on the ground. Maybe in small island countries, there are 2 or 3 technicians who can do the job, right? But online operation and maintenance support, how that can be provided. So it's also very important to think about leveraging the digital kind of potential into this whole system that we are talking about.
Absolutely. And, but I also think the basic skills in the solar industry, maybe not so much the marketing and the sales, but the basic sort of skills, hopefully are not too threatened by AI. But we shall see. I just want to ask before we go to Rodrigo, Janice, are you also seeing that across the APAC region where you have some countries with aging populations, some with very young populations? Do you also see different skills strategies across that kind of metric, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think definitely. In terms of the wind industry, what's really important, in my opinion, is that you align workforce strategies and skills strategies to the national energy planning. That's one. And the second one is the industrial policies for each country. Different countries will have different kind of national skills focuses backed on their industrial policies. So of course, if their industrial policy is to focus and to look into the energy transition and the uptake of renewable energy, they will be looking at these trends. I'll take an example of the Philippines, right? The Philippines is very well known for exporting their workforce. They now want to develop local renewable energy, specifically offshore wind, and they're seeing that there's a large shortage of workforce, essentially, and they need to think of a strategy now to make sure that it's attractive for workforce to come back to the Philippines. At the same time, the Philippines is also traditionally very famous for seafarers. So they're also thinking about how the seafarers can be transitioned into serving offshore wind.
Very clever, and I think also the point about how you need to marry industrial policy with a skills strategy is really important for large-scale solar as well. Rodrigo, I want to come to you last, just to give us a global picture in your position as chairman of the Global Solar Council. How do you see? We're currently 7 million plus. We'll come up with an updated number next year as a Global Solar Council. This could end up being 20, 30, 40 million people. How do you see us bringing this together as a workforce and really thinking ahead in terms of the global solar workforce across all the different the different skill sets we mentioned on the slide, policy work, marketing work, sales, and so on and so forth. What can we do to bring all these people together?
Great question, Sonia. And I'm not sure I have a crystal ball, but I'll try my best. So I would start by saying that we will need to adapt our training to the specific segments that we are talking about. And in the solar case, we have to remember that although we do have technical work, we have a lot of work that is not technical. And this creates opportunities also for areas in humanities, areas in communication, in administration, business, in management, in marketing, and many other fields such as sales, logistics, that will require specific knowledge and specific training. So this is because as we progress with solar photovoltaic participation in our economies, solar will become an integral part of our society. So we need to really include this into many knowledge fields and to prepare people to be able to participate in this market in many different areas, because we will need professionals for all these fields to help us keep growing and keep developing. Additionally, Sonia, I think we will need special attention to investment in innovation. We have to prepare professionals and keep preparing professionals for research, development, and innovation. And that's not only developing new equipment.
And you are a solar scientist yourself. What was your PhD in?
Exactly in manufacturing solar cells. So
There we go.
yes, and it's not only about the manufacturing of the equipments, which is of course very important. We have to remind ourselves that much of the cost reduction of solar photovoltaics was only possible due to innovation in the labs that was transferred to the industries and that then was transferred to the fields and people. But we also have to innovate in business models. As solar become more accessible, we can include solar not only on the rooftops of buildings, but on the cars, on the boats, on the airplanes, on the bags, you know, on the umbrellas, wherever we can imagine. We will be able to start and include this technology. And so we need to innovate on the business models, on how to offer this to society so that they can see benefit and we can accelerate the energy transition through it.
So lastly, I want to turn to you, the audience. How many of you are interested in working in the solar or battery storage sector? Put up your hand. 1, 2. Okay. Well, we encourage you all to consider this as a career option for yourselves, especially those of you that are more youthful than others, and really consider, you know, using some of the tools that we are creating here as part of your introduction to the sector. So with that, we'll leave it at that. Feel free to approach any of the speakers with any questions that you might have, and really hope that you engage and support the implementation of the Global Solar Training Standard, as well as engage with the Star C centers all around the world that the International Solar Alliance is deploying in all of its partner countries. So thank you very much, and if we can please give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you.